How can a law book written way back in Queen Victoria's time, we're talking over 160 years ago, have anything useful to say about modern financial crime? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But believe it or not, the original source code for crime, written in the 19th century, actually gives us some surprisingly sharp insights into the corporate scandals we see today. But before we dig into old laws, let's step back and ask a really basic question. We usually think of crime as something physical, theft or violence. But what if the most damaging crimes aren't committed with a weapon at all, but with something as simple as a lie? Yeah, the definition of a crime can be way more subtle than we think. So to figure this out, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the official rulebook that defines what a crime actually is and what it isn't. And here it is, the Indian Penal Code of 1860. Now, that date might make you think of some dusty, forgotten relic, but it's way better to think of this as the foundational operating system for criminal justice in India. It literally contains the essential definitions that are still used to prosecute everything from petty theft to the most complex corporate fraud today. You see, this code breaks down a criminal act into its core components. You could almost call it the anatomy of an offense. And to really get a handle on how modern financial crimes work, we first need to grasp these three fundamental ingredients.
The first key ingredient is wrongful gain. It sounds a little formal, but the idea is super simple. You gain something through illegal means that you have absolutely no legal right to. In short, it's not yours to take. Simple as that.
Okay, the next layer is all about intent. An act only becomes legally dishonest when the intention was to cause that wrongful gain for yourself or a wrongful loss for someone else. So now we're moving beyond just the act itself and getting inside the head of the person who did it. The law is trying to figure out what was going on in their mind. And the final core component? Acting fraudulently. This is all about pure deceit. It requires a specific intent to defraud, which means you're not just hoping for a wrongful gain. You are actively tricking someone to make it happen. So here's how all those ideas come together. This example was written in 1860, but honestly, it could have been pulled from today's news headlines. A dishonestly convinces Z to lend him money, even though A has no intention of ever repaying it. A cheats. I mean, come on, that is a timeless, perfect definition of fraud. So now that we're armed with these 19th century definitions, let's jump forward to the 21st century and meet the modern white-collar criminal. The tools have definitely changed, but as we've just seen, the core ideas behind the crime, they've pretty much stayed the same. To understand the modern side of this, we're turning to a contemporary source, an analysis from the International Journal of Creative Research Thoughts. This research digs into the recent explosion of these sophisticated financial crimes and asks a really critical question. Why is this happening now? This slide just lays it out so clearly. Traditional crime often relies on physical force, but white-collar crime, what they call sweet crime, it uses deceit, concealment, and a violation of trust. Its weapon isn't a fist. It's a fraudulent spreadsheet or a promise that was never meant to be kept. And that brings us to the core question here. If the definitions of these crimes are so old, why are we seeing such a dramatic rise in them today? What is fueling this fire?
Well, the research points to a perfect storm of factors. You've got growing income gaps that create both desperation and motivation. Then there's this constant societal pressure to have a certain lifestyle, which makes cutting corners feel normal. Add in some gaps in regulation that create loopholes, and top it all off with new technology that creates powerful new tools for committing old crimes on a massive scale.
Let's just focus on that human element for a second. When the gap between the life you have and the life you feel you're supposed to have gets just a little too wide, well, the temptation to bend the rules grows. And in some corporate or social circles, this pressure can be so intense that unethical, even illegal behavior starts to feel totally normal, maybe even necessary to survive. But the damage from these crimes goes so far beyond a single victim or one company's balance sheet. The real cost is the erosion of something far, far more valuable. As the research points out, one of the most serious consequences is the loss of faith in our institutions. When people in powerful positions use deceit for their own personal gain, it just chips away at our trust in the very systems designed to protect us. Financial losses can be recovered, but that loss of faith, that's much, much harder to repair. And believe me, this is not a victimless crime. It has a huge ripple effect across all of society, weakening democratic institutions and basically poisoning the well for economic growth.
I mean, after all, who wants to invest their money in a system they believe is rigged?
Which leaves us with this final fascinating question. The core principles of dishonesty and fraud laid out back in 1860 are as relevant as ever, for sure. But as criminals get more sophisticated and technology just accelerates the pace and scale of crime, can a legal framework from a totally different era really keep up? That's the challenge we're facing right now.